All right, so it's 7:36 and we'll call to order our regular meeting. And if you would join me for the pledge. Maybe. All right, can you see that?
No, we can't see it. There we are. Now you're back.
Okay, hang on. Is that working?
Sorry, no, the screen share, it says that participants have the ability to share, but it's not, your screen's not coming up.
Okay. Well, then if you would just join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So Mr. Dilley, you are up. Hopefully you are looking into a very clear crystal ball and you have all of the answers that the world does not have, and you can help us sort through our future.
Well, I hate to disappoint. I don't have all of the answers, but I'm going to try to answer some of the questions this evening for you all. Let me go ahead and begin here with sharing this presentation, and hopefully we don't have any difficulties. Is everybody able to see that okay? Very good. So I wanted to share with you a little bit about what we're calling flexible learning environments, just as a term to try to help separate or distinguish some of the different components for our families to take advantage of. And one of those, first and foremost, is the traditional classroom model, which is something we're very accustomed to and have been doing very well in Jefferson County. And one of the things that I think is important to distinguish tonight's presentation is this is not talking about what the traditional classroom will look like in the fall, because there's a lot of unanswered questions there and there's a lot of questions that surround that, but we will be continuing to plan and try to help navigate those waters when we get a little closer to that time. But parents also have the opportunity to participate in our virtual academy. And this is where our students were 100% online, and they have the ability to work with an online instructor. Now, one of the things that we're going to be adding or expanding this coming year is we're going to be expanding to our elementary students. In years past, we weren't able to support anybody but middle school and high school. And now that we've gone through that threshold as far as the policies requirements were from the state, we are now able to enlarge that virtual academy opportunity to our elementary students. And one of our hopes down the road is that we can support that virtual academy program with our own staff. Now, the question is going to be participation, but if participation remains low, then we're going to continue to use the vendor provider that provides West Virginia certified teachers to support that right now. But the hope is, as we move forward with this programming, we will be able to utilize our own staff. That is our goal. And the final is the blended option for our high school students, and that is where students are taking advantage of our basically when they're taking advantage of our traditional classroom with the option to consider virtual education programs, or such as the West Virginia virtual schools, the virtual academy programs, or our on-site or online higher education opportunities for our high school students only. Right now, we are only going to be supporting our high school students in that realm because of the logistics surrounding that. But we hope to in the future to expand a lot of these opportunities. But this is where we feel confident that we can support and do well, as we've been continuing to do. So we're going to be looking at supporting these environments by holding a number of stakeholder meetings, including incorporating professional development, looking at social emotional support, caregiver and custodian assistance, are continuing to expand our digital equity initiative, Wi-Fi access expansion. Oh, looks like one of my slides was out of order here, so apologize for that. But so we're going to be holding a number of stakeholder meetings coming up, and we've actually already started these as early as last week, and we're going to be inviting a large number of our staff to try to participate with us and get as many different inputs. As you can see from this list, quite a few different types of individuals are going to be involved with these meetings. We do have them, as you can see, many of them are scheduled for this week because we are working on a rather aggressive timeline to try to get as much information as quickly as possible to start assembling these things, because time is going very quickly for us as we try to get things prepared for us as we move forward. So the professional development is obviously going to be targeted about supporting our teachers in the virtual and blended classroom environments. And so we know as we move forward, we're going to have to make sure teachers have the capabilities and have the support and to operate the software and the platforms to enable students to work through that. We also want to continue our efforts in amplifying technology for our traditional classrooms as we move forward. And we want to make sure that our service personnel also plugged into these particular and make sure that they have professional development as well as we move forward. We also want to make sure as we are moving forward that our students and considerations that we think about in our social emotional health, that we consider about not only for our traditional classroom, that we think about those for our virtual and blended classrooms, which is something that we're going to have to give a lot of consideration because we don't have some of the same tools available to us in a traditional classroom environment. But these are areas that our social emotional department are actively digging into now and attempting to work through right now and doing a good job to support folks. But there's nothing that beats the very close nature of being in the same room together with one another, especially with very sensitive and difficult topics. But we are going to be working through and navigating those particular things. But we also realize that we have to provide support for our families in many different ways. And one of the things that we want to do is continue to build on our professional development for our virtual and blended learning participants. We've actually already done a number of trainings for the Google Classroom and some of those other platforms, and we want to continue to build on that. But we also know that our stakeholder input is going to have some really value in that, in directing what our professional development is going to be doing. We also know that we need to establish some technical assistance for people participating in these pathways so that they are ensured that they can navigate and work through the software and take advantage of the full instructional opportunities that are being provided to them. Or also, we want to make sure that parents and students have resources or assistance available to them to work through those assignments and activities, because they aren't always clear when they're just spelled out on a screen for us. So we want to make sure that they have that set up and established for them. We also want to continue building on our digital equity initiative. This is something that you've already supported. We did a survey and we did find a number of families that were needing support. And so one of the things that we did with that initial funding support was buy 1,000 Chromebooks, and we have been in the process of delivering those out. And we anticipate that that's going to continue to grow, and this is going to be supporting our one-to-one initiative as we continue to move forward, as we've allocated additional funds out of our Step 7 and our technology to budget to prioritize supporting this. And so within that equity issue that we were wanting to try to continue that rollout to our families, we're continuing to target those families with no devices, those with a smartphone only, or a household that maybe only has one device but has multiple children of school age and those available to them. So we're going to continue to target those as well as some other equity issues that we've identified, but those are the 3 top priorities in making sure that we address the disparity first as we move towards our one-to-one. We felt like that was the place to start first and foremost to address those needs, and then move forward with providing all of our students down the road. And one of the final areas that we wanted to address is looking at our Wi-Fi expansion. And so we want to look at our strategic bus locations and enabling our some buses to be Wi-Fi enabled, so that we could potentially park those in areas and enable some folks to be able to get near those and do that. We also want to expand our school parking lot access. Currently, Wi-Fi access is not available in all areas due to the limitations of cellular devices. So we want to look at expanding those school parking lots, because we do have 2 currently, and we want to look at expanding those. But we also want to look at reaching out to our community partners and to see if there's folks willing to allow parents to park in their parking lot and jump on their Wi-Fi services and allow for that. And one final piece that I didn't add on here is we're also exploring cellular devices themselves. So a Chromebook that would have actual cellular device to enable to engage into the internet. So that is a very, very quick synopsis of what we're doing. And I'm going to switch screens, but if somebody has a question while I'm switching screens here to share with you some of the other information.
Mr. Dilly, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Virtual academies for the 100% online as well as the blended, is that going to be through the West Virginia Department of Ed, or what program is that going to be? Because that's going to be very different from what students experienced this past spring.
That is correct, yes. Now, part of this will depend upon the number of participants that we have requesting these pathways. If we have enough requesting these pathways, I will probably be coming back to you either to request some additional staff to support it, or we'll be looking at a method of transferring some folks around to support our own staff teaching that. But again, a lot of that depends on what we have as far as demand from our public. Because there's a certain threshold, it doesn't make sense to do our own staff, because there's just no way for teachers to be available to teach 30 or 40 or 50 different courses. So we have to look at that demand element of it. But currently, we are using Odysseyware, who uses West Virginia certified teachers to support their online learning environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dilly, and how is it going to be monitored throughout the implementation? And then I have a couple other questions as well. But basically, who's going to be the point person, and how are we going to know that the implementation is working the way that we anticipate it to work?
Well, we're still working out a few of the nuts and bolts, to be very honest about it, as we move forward. But Jen and I have been talking about the accountability piece quite a bit, and looking at how we can ensure the pieces are taking part, are supporting the general initiative. So really the whole C9 team has really kind of gotten behind this and is working on components. So my anticipation is those same folks will be collecting data on those different areas that they are supporting currently at this time. So that's my general thinking on that right now, because there are quite a few different components of this to make this support these programs as we move forward.
Sure. And back to, you said that you're doing some query of the community. How are we going to really make sure that we're getting the voice of a very diverse range of both students, family, and staff?
We are still working on some details on that specifically. We're trying to get that set up. I was hoping to have an answer for you this evening. We're trying to work on a couple different platforms to try to get as many different stakeholder voices as possible. But part of it is also some strategic invitations of folks of those different categories. And we're going to continue to try throughout the summer, I think, to get more and more voices as we move forward. We anticipate this first round will provide us some level of consensus about the direction to move forward, but we'll continue to do that, because one of the other areas we know that we will have to basically pursue is the number of participants that are interested in pursuing one of these alternative paths beyond the traditional pathway, because that's going to dictate a lot of where we shift our funding and where we provide support. But right now, my anticipation is that if we attempt to try to find out right now, we'll see a different number come in the fall. And so I want to try to wait a little bit longer towards midsummer before we pursue trying to find out exactly who we have interested in pursuing the different pathways. So once we determine a little closer to what those pathway, the volume supporting those, then we'll be able to dictate a little bit of what the resources are going to be allocated to each group for the coming year.
Will we be creating like a mock-up that we can release for like community information sessions, or how will we get what that looks like? Because I do get questions from the community you know, how do they make these decisions, which way they're going to go. So if we had some type of mock-up of this is what it could look like, you know, with more details, it might be helpful to our community.
That's a great suggestion. We can definitely work on something. I know that the OdysseyWare platform provides us that information, as well as the work that Jen and Michelle Cantley and the academic coaches have already put together some stuff on the Google Classroom. So once we kind of, like I said, determine that volume and that critical threshold, then we'll be able to determine the direction. Because like I said, if I had my choice, we're going to use our own staff to support this. But again, a lot of that depends on how much demand we have for from our students.
Okay. And then one other thing under the social emotional, certainly one of the things that we saw here in the spring was the social and emotional support that parents needed. So how can we provide, you know, professional development even for our parents, because they are that third leg, right? You know, it takes three legs, the student, teacher, and the parent. So how do we help them to support their students? Because we do know that this is going to be more rigorous than what we had in the spring.
Absolutely, it's going to be more rigorous, and that is probably the number one challenge I think people choose when they choose the virtual academy, is the rigor is what is provides the most demand. And so I think what we in the process, because parents have been a big part of our conversation in trying to provide support for this whole process. And so part of that assistance, I think, will be just putting best practices together and providing some different sessions on, you know, these things work well, these things, you know, maybe you want to try to do these things with your kids, and supporting this initiative. We've seen a number of those come from outside the state, from different sources, Ed Week, I think in some other places I've seen some good articles. So we can definitely follow up with an assembly of those different things for our parents. Again, we're kind of in the early planning stages right now and gathering feedback, but those are definitely options and considerations we've been giving some consideration to and we'll move forward with.
And if we do utilize teachers to create this as opposed to using like Odyssey, we'll be looking at something in terms of universal design for learning. I know there's a scan tool that will look at your curriculum and make sure that, you know, it's accessible to all of our students, because certainly we have students that we need to make sure that everyone has that accessibility.
Yes, accessibility would definitely be a consideration. I'm not as familiar with the tool you're referring to,
Okay.
but I'd be happy to explore that
Sure.
because that is a consideration we've talked about, and a limitation that we know we have to do. We have to represent as we move forward with our virtual approach.
Yeah, it's at a University of Kansas, Dr. Stephen Smith. So, yeah, I'll provide you some information on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay. What I have sharing here in front of you, I want to give a shout out for Jennifer Rowland. She's quickly put this together for us. She's done a fantastic job through this conversation, and I put together this sort of a one-page guidance document for people, just as an infographic quickly to share with folks. But what she's done here is put together a whole list of resources, and as you can see, this is a pretty aggressive timeline that we've put together for trying to get as much of the information put together for our team. So our team is kind of running in high gear right now on each of these components as we frame this around these different concepts. And so each one of these has several stages, and I won't go through all of them obviously, but I just wanted to show that we are in the process of putting these together, and our teams are meeting right now. And so they're providing notes from their discussions with leading questions. And so there's been a significant amount of work to put this framework together. And so we're anticipating that a lot of this will help guide us through the remaining components of the final design of this as we move forward with our flexible learning environments.
Mr. Dilley, I just have a
Yes.
quick question.
Mm-hmm.
The West Virginia, the Odyssey program, I believe is what you said it was. Is that, so that does the content standards, correct, for the same ones we used for the mapping guides for math and English and those types of things, correct?
That is correct. Yes, basically, if we're utilizing them, they're using West Virginia certified, and there has to be a minimum of an 80% alignment with our state standards. So, and in some cases, it's higher than that. So we have been doing that vetting as we move forward. But again, if we can get to where we want to get to, there won't be any alignment concerns or challenges because we'll be using our own pacing guides and we'll be using our own staff to develop that curriculum.
So for me, I guess that's my biggest concern is to make sure, you know, in a perfect world for me, we would, starting the middle of August to the beginning of September, have one-to-one devices for every student, so that it didn't matter whether you were in the classroom, out of the classroom. It doesn't matter when flu season hits. It doesn't matter, you know, if COVID comes back. None of those pieces matter. We will be in a place to have every child prepared, and making sure as well, staffing wise, I know that if we want to use our own folks, which I do think you're right, we need to, because they know our students best. Is there a way we can find or, you know, or structure funding to be sure this summer, you know, we're paying our top-notch people to create all the Google Classrooms, to do all those different content standards, even the ones that, you know, we need to go back for and maybe work with some students because they've missed things that then they realize they're going to need. Or as well, in the technology department, you know, if we find that Miss Rowan needs some help in there because this does expand to that level. But having them break apart all of that, can we research some companies and look to see, you know, is there a company available that can do that with our own staff, making sure that we hit this ground running, and those teachers that are getting obviously the best testing scores and have the most success in those classrooms are comfortable with virtual learning to be able to do that. So we do get that blend of synchronous versus asynchronous teaching, no matter what the student chooses, and we can, you know, move forward with that. I mean, I know it's a big leap, and before now I would have thought there's no way, but we didn't have a choice, and we had to rip off a huge band-aid, and they've already done it. But a lot of staff we saw definitely felt uncomfortable. It was exciting to see so many of them that just dove right in and said, well, I'm going to try it. You know, if I fail, I fail. At the same time, I think we need to kind of see about what might be our cost to break this down and make sure that we can move forward with it. In that way, how do we get to the one-to-one initiative by the fall? And can we take this summer and get some of our staff to start creating these classroom videos to be able to utilize them, go content standard, take the mapping guides, especially for math and English, and you know,
I was going to say, I think we can definitely put together some teams this summer and put together a start or a library of those different things. We can definitely start. It makes a lot of sense to start with English and math. As far as being 100% ready for a one-to-one for everything in the fall, I don't know that we have a budget that can support that. First and foremost, I think we'd have to phase that in. But part of it is too, until we have a sense of what level of participation from our community, because if we have a large participation rate, we should be able to reallocate some existing staff from our classrooms to support this. And I do believe there would be teachers willing to do that based on what I've been hearing from some principals and things. But then secondly, we'd have to look at providing some infrastructure support with resources such as Ms. Rowan's office and her department. And I don't want to get there until we know we need that with 100%. And what the demand is going to be. Obviously, we'll never fully know until the fall and we get beyond Labor Day. But for right now, what I would suggest that we do is we just move forward strategically. We can definitely do as many library setups as far as videos for the future and take advantage of that. But I would be a little bit hesitant until we know exactly how many of our community members want to support in the virtual academy approach.
I just wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents in there. But do we have a contingency plan? Because what if, you know, everybody opts to send their students to school, but then we do have a second wave, or we go into the winter, and then we kind of where we were in March. So just being proactive, I can certainly, you know, want to support that, you know, we really need to have a plan and a contingency plan for what happens at each juncture throughout this.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. We are considering that. Part of the stakeholder meetings that we're holding is kind of getting some best practices and feedback about what's worked, what hasn't worked, so that we can be prepared. The more I'm hearing, and this is just a personal opinion, I don't see us starting a traditional year, so we have to be prepared for that. So I'm anticipating that information we're gathering now and throughout the summer, that will help ensure that we are far better placed in preparation for what's coming this fall than we were at this last juncture. Even though our folks have done a tremendous job stepping up and leading this in very quick time, and we appreciate what they've done in that regard. Again, I wish could say I had all the answers right now, but part of it is about listening to our stakeholders too, and making sure that we're evolving that with them. But with our aggressive timeline, our team feels pretty confident that we'll have some good things moving forward, and we'll bring back some updates as we move forward through the summer as well for you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dilly.
You're welcome.
And, you know, who knew 2 years ago when we actually started this virtual academy that this is where we'd be?
I would have lost that bet.
I would have put money on it this way, but you know, that's okay. We couldn't grow that program fast enough in my mind, but we really grew it now.
Absolutely.
We just have to be careful because, you know, life is about unforeseen circumstances and all this other stuff. And I think we may have just taken all of the joy out of snow days in the future. So just those consequences are real. All right. Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Dilly? Well, thank you very much for that presentation. All right. Superintendent's comments. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments this evening?
No, ma'am.
All right. Well, I just want to quickly say thank you to the seniors and staff and family and friends for getting together for the parade on May 17th to make that day just a little bit better for those kids. So thank you to everybody that was out there supporting them. Approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held May 11th, 2020?
Laurie, so moved.
Is there a second?
Osborne, second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any comments or changes to the minutes? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from the regular board meeting held May 11th, 2020?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, citizens' comments. I know we were in the middle of our budget meeting at 6:45 this evening, so nobody was able to kind of say that they want to do public comment. So I'll give everybody just a moment. If somebody's interested, please speak now. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to, was that somebody speak?
On the consent agenda, you will notice that there's one change, number 38. we had someone who had requested a transfer and they changed their mind, so that transfer request is deleted. There are no other changes to the consent agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second, Osborne.
Here, Mr. Osborne.
Where's mine going?
Any comments or discussion about the consent agenda?
I have a question about I'd like to make a motion that we amend the consent agenda by pulling off 19 and 20 until we have a report from the special ed department because of the learning needs that we obviously have with the virtual learning and with some of the kind of pitfalls that we've had. I feel like we need a little more of an in-depth look at that department as far as what we may or may not need going forward, and needs to be changes to that to be able to meet the needs. Obviously the budget is sparse in some ways, but I do think that there will be some of those needs that we're going to have to address. And I just, they need to be a little bit more targeted possibly, especially in the area of special ed. That's going to be an issue for us, obviously in meeting needs, as we have, seen across the country. And they are, I think, the most vulnerable population. And I don't know if just those two things are going to cut it. That's my thought process. At least tabling those two positions till the next meeting so we can have some guidance on how that's going to look or change.
19 and 20, or 17, 18, 19, and 20.
I think it was just 19 and 20, but let me look. Well, because they're all related to special ed, if we want to wait to do the 17, 18, 19, and 20 and try to get a better handle on that. I think I have an understanding on the 17 and 18, but I don't think to wait one more meeting, it's going to hurt to really have a handle on those specifically. If you think so, Mr. Dilly or Dr. Gibson, based on what you know, just let us know what your thoughts are.
I would certainly agree that population is going to require not only additional, but specially sculpted resources. And as we're speaking with our staff, they have some pretty widely varying experiences. So I think it's a good idea for us to perhaps separate that out and do a separate presentation for you based on the information that we have. So you could put it in context, because you may need more or less differently placed resources for that. So we're happy to do that.
And Dr. Gibson, would you suggest pulling 17 and 18 as well as 19 and 20? It's the BCBA and the PERC.
Right. Now the BCBA and the PERC, those are part of that larger disproportionality grant. And I believe we have until June 30th to submit that. So we should be fine. We could certainly, that is a different funding source, but it's still part of the overall solution. So yes.
Okay, so we currently have a motion on the floor, so we need to clean that one up first. So if Ms. Ogden wants to amend the motion, let's just get rid of the first one first. So anybody in favor of keeping the original motion of the consent agenda? Those opposed to passing the original consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion died. So now, Ms. Ogden, did you want to make a different motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda minus the 17, 18, 19, and 20 positions and get an overview on that as a whole, on how we need to make some of those changes to better meet the needs of that special ed population and where we are going forward in this virtual piece as well.
Okay. So is there a second motion?
Wendy, I'll second.
All right, so the new motion is to approve the consent agenda, removing 17, 18, 19, and 20. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. All right, unfinished business. We have action on approval for the Ranson Elementary School roof bid.
Good evening. Our recommendation for the Ranson roof bid is Blackstone with a bid of $195,000. We did receive 3 bids for the Ranson roof project.
And Ms. White, do we have timing for that?
Yes, we do. That project is slated to begin on June the 10th, I believe. Brandon, you can confirm the day after elections are over. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So is there a motion to approve Blackstone for the Ranson Elementary School roof?
So move Osborne.
Second?
Lori, second.
Any question or discussion? All right,
Just to say thank you to Joyce and Brandon for making sure we had 3 bids, and that was really well done.
Thank you.
all in favor of approving the Ranson Elementary School roof bid to Blackstone?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right. Next is 12B, action on approval of the special education cameras in the classroom policy.
We have had the special education cameras in classroom policy on comments. We have received no comments during the comment period for this policy. We do have a slight amendment to the policy, which is reflected in the attachment, and that is to delete the language in the first line upon appropriation of funds by the West Virginia legislature, as funds have been appropriated and we can fund our camera venture for special education cameras in classrooms completely. So that is our only change, and we are requesting that you accept the policy this evening.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the special education camera in classroom policy?
So moved.
Second Osborne.
Thank you. Any question or discussion?
Just to clarify on what Ms. White said, that we were taking that line item out because originally when they passed that, it was put in there that they would, I'm assuming, at some point fund that, but recognizing the need that it has to be done. Thank you again to Ms. White for figuring out how to secure funding to make sure that that happens.
I just want to clarify that they did provide 81,000. The state did provide 81,000 to fund that. So that made that unnecessary, that language. So
Yeah. Thank you.
you're welcome.
It's our hope to get that done and completed prior to the August start date.
Yes, ma'am, that is our hope. Mhm.
Okay. All in favor of approving the special education cameras and classroom policy?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, next we have action on approval of open enrollment policy. Is there a motion?
So moved, Lori.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lochner. All right, Mr. Daly, did we have, or Ms. White, did we have any comments?
No, we did not receive any comments on the policy. And again, I would just encourage you to keep the stated language as is what is supported by Neola and the insurance policy supported by Neola for the, if we get into any lawsuits.
Great. All in favor, any discussion about the open enrollment policy?
My discussion is only about things in there that are repeated. And there's a spot on page 3 of 5 where the font is different, to just change that, just to make sure that it's nice and clean as we send that out for good. But those were my only thoughts.
We will take care of that.
Okay. So all in favor of approving the open enrollment policy?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, and then we have to go back to approving the budget number 2B from earlier this evening. Is there a motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 21 budget pending state board approval?
So let me ask this. Okay, so Mark, go ahead.
Osborne, so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, discussion. Ms. Ogden, did you have something?
Just because some of those positions may be in that budget, is it possible to, the funding for those specific positions to be set aside to where if they need to change or be something different, do we need to do that within that realm to amend that motion to accept the budget without those allocated funds being used for that and to be in salary, but instead leaving them in contingency until they can be transferred based on what's decided? Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes a difference, Beth or Dr. Gibson.
I understand what you mean. We would not allocate any funds toward those positions until or unless the board approved them. Until you approve them, they do not exist, so none of that funding will go towards them.
Okay.
Yeah, it can sit, the funding can sit where it is, and it will only be approved when it comes back to the board in the way that Amy has developed the logistics of it. We don't necessarily have to transfer it to the reserve. It'll just sit there and be a line item until filled.
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion. All in favor of approving the budget from 2B?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. And no new business. And I don't believe we have an executive session, do we, this evening? Thank you.
No, ma'am, we do not.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate you joining us.